Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mr. Hurricane, and today I'll be talking about the Minnesota Vikings trading for quarterback Sam Bradford. I don't do many of these videos anymore, although I do like talking about the Vikings, and I'm always talking about them during the season on Twitter, not so much on my channel. But when it comes to a situation like Sam Bradford in this trade, where there are so many different things to consider, I prefer to go to video to talk about it, and because I just like talking about the Vikings, and it sucks we have to talk about, replacing Teddy Bridgewater after an injury, but that's the reality of the Vikings right now. And in case you didn't know, maybe some of you are new around here, I am a Minnesota Vikings fan, and let's dive into this trade. So I've expected the Vikings to acquire a quarterback sometime, around the weekend or Monday perhaps. I didn't expect it to be a trade for Sam Bradford Saturday morning. But that's what happened, kind of out of nowhere, a first-round pick plus a conditional fourth-round pick in 2018 for Sam Bradford. Just a couple nights ago, during the final preseason game, they had Rick Spielman, the general manager, in the booth for commentary in the third quarter, talking about how there were outrageous demands for quarterbacks available via trade. So given that, I assume the Vikings would probably go more to the free agency route, especially after final cuts, to find that second veteran quarterback to add to the roster behind Shaun Hill and to potentially play over him, but instead they made the aggressive move for Sam Bradford. Again, it's a first round pick and a conditional fourth, and I was reading that the fourth round pick can become a third if they make it to like the NFC Championship game, and it becomes a second if they either make it or win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure which one it is. I also saw something about Bradford needing to play in like 80% of the snaps or something. So let's just look at it as a first and a fourth right now. If it becomes a first and more than a fourth, then clearly the trade worked out and the Vikings did very well with Sam Bradford. But at the moment, a first round pick and a fourth. I still can't believe they gave up a first round pick. When Teddy was hurt and I thought about the best available quarterbacks in a trade potentially, I didn't think that much about Sam Bradford because I actually thought the Eagles wanted to be patient with Carson Wentz, but clearly now it's looking like he might even be starting in week 1 if he's healthy. I also thought his price might be too much for the Vikings, and clearly that is not the case. So first off, I'll say I think it's a good trade for the Eagles just because they get rid of a quarterback they did not want. They're banking on their future with Carson Wentz. They gave up a lot of picks to get him, and it just so happens they could trade Sam Bradford for at the least a 1 and a 4. That's really good for their franchise, especially if Carson Wentz works out for them. Now for the Vikings, giving up a first round pick, that's a really big deal, and it shows, I think, how much faith they have in this current team. The 2016 Vikings clearly have very high expectations with a defense that has improved every year under Mike Zimmer. It was very good last year, still with room for improvement, and hopefully they do make some more improvements this year. They do appear to have more depth thanks to picks like Mackenzie Alexander and Jaron Kearse, and Daniil Hunter was a great find last year in the third round, and the offense relies mainly on a ground and pound approach behind Adrian Peterson and a hopefully improved offensive line. Still, they want to get this passing game more involved and just better in general. The Vikings were a very poor passing team last year. The offensive line was not very good. Teddy Bridgewater had an up and down season, and the receiving core had very little reliability outside of Stephon Diggs, who was a rookie. There are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the 2016 Vikings, but of course with Teddy Bridgewater's injury, a lot of that optimism had dashed. And my immediate reaction too when he was injured, and it proved to be a very serious injury, was that, well, this season's probably over now. And that was maybe a little bit of an overreaction because the Vikings do rely more on their defense and ground game than their passing game. And once I thought about it a bit more, I didn't think the season was necessarily over, although I did think it would be somewhat of a challenge for them to make the postseason if they were relying on Shaun Hill. And I thought Shaun Hill was a better option than many of the others out there when you consider like Mark Sanchez's availability, maybe TJ Yates. Perhaps you could convince the Browns to let go of Josh McCown, but these options don't give a lot of hope, especially in late September when week 1 is just around the corner. Now, they go and get Sam Bradford, whom I would say is the best available quarterback, or was the best available quarterback, when you stack him up next to Josh McCown, Mark Sanchez, and whoever else is out there. I'm not really looking at more of the younger options. Most of them are still unknown commodities. We've seen plenty of young quarterbacks do well, get traded, then do poorly, and that's the end of that. Now, A.J. McCarron, of course, that was someone talked about. He played well last year. He helped the Bengals get to the postseason after Andy Dalton's injury. You have Mike Glennon down in Tampa Bay, but it's not like these teams are just going to hand over their backup quarterbacks, especially in the case of McCarron, a more recent case of a backup young quarterback playing well. I mean, he had to play because Andy Dalton was hurt. This is not a team that had to be reminded the value of a backup quarterback. So if you were to try and trade for A.J. McCarron, and they know that you're desperate, because you just lost Teddy Bridgewater and all you have is Joel Stave and Sean Hill, Taylor Heineke on the NFI list. I mean, that's why they had to trade what they did for Bradford. The price, the market, saw the demand the Vikings had. The Vikings have a promising roster, and they're a team that wants to win right now, clearly, so the price for these quarterbacks went up. I assume if the Vikings could have convinced the Bengals to trade for A.J. McCarron, I have no idea if they had interest, but I assume if they made a deal, it would also be a situation where you're saying, why did the Vikings give up so much? So the Vikings elected to go for a veteran quarterback as opposed to a younger quarterback, which is a move I expected them to do, just to have someone with more experience there, because you're likely looking at somebody who's going to play at some point this season, and your options are probably better off with a veteran. I thought that they would end up trading for Mark Sanchez at some point. I thought he would come cheap and potentially just be cut and signed for just money and no picks. But they went all in. They went for Sam Bradford. Now, I have to say I like the aggressiveness of the front office to believe in their team and to go get the quarterback they think can still keep this puzzle intact. They gave up a lot to do it. You don't see very many first-round picks being traded unless it's for a trade-up for a rookie quarterback, not a 7-year veteran like Sam Bradford. So how risky of a move is this for the Vikings? I honestly don't think it's that big of a risk. Sure, you could lose a first-round pick, a very valuable piece to any team, but the Vikings, I believe, are in a position to where they can afford to take this risk. If this trade goes completely wrong for the Vikings and they don't get anywhere near the value that they gave up for Sam Bradford, I don't think it hurts them that bad. It's not good to lose a first-round pick, obviously, and a fourth-round pick in the future, but they have drafted and developed a very young and talented group of players, especially on the defensive side. They also have a lot of promise with talented players on the offense, and you have younger players like Stephon Diggs and Jerick McKinnon, Michael Pruitt, and hopefully the offensive line can step up. The big thing to me is if this season doesn't work out, well, you just missed the chance in the first round to help solidify the offensive line. Who knows if either tackle will be on the team next season or how Brandon Fusco is going to play this year. So there's a lot of uncertainty with the offensive line moving forward. That's where I think the risk is really the most impactful. If it doesn't work out, you miss a prime chance to potentially fix a spot of the offensive line. And that's me projecting the offensive line as probably one of the weaker areas of the team again. And if you consider where that first round pick is likely to be, well, you could kind of go all over the place. I don't think the Vikings will be in any kind of position to acquire a blue chip player in like the top 5 next year. A lot of things would have to go wrong for them to be that bad. So I expect the earliest this pick is going to be is somewhere in the mid to late teens. I'm not saying I agree with the decision to part ways with a first round selection plus more for Sam Bradford, but I don't think it will hurt the Vikings that badly if this doesn't work out. So let's talk more about now Sam Bradford's spot with the Minnesota Vikings in 2016. I think it's pretty easy to look at this and at a glance just say this was a dumb trade, and I mean, you can't prove this trade in September before week 1's even played, so it's not like there's an argument to say no, this trade was worth it, because we're all trying to project, how the team is actually going to do with Sam Bradford, and it's going to be tough to live up to these expectations with a first round pick and a fourth. But I like the player. I'm not so much sure about the picks, But I do think that they gave themselves their best chance for success this year. I don't think there was another quarterback they could have gone to get that can fit into Norv Turner's offense, has some experience, and can play well. Bradford had a much better end to the season last year than the beginning, and of course is in a very different offense now with Norv Turner in Minnesota, and I'm not even sure when Sam Bradford's even going to be starting. I'm thinking the earliest is week 2, and maybe even that's earlier than the Vikings are thinking. Week 1, I certainly don't think so. I expect it to be Sean Hill at least week 1, and then maybe they'll make a change after that. But I like Sam Bradford, the player, and although we're talking about the value of the trade right now and was it a good move for Minnesota, well, let's not even consider the picks. Those selections will be made in 8 months. How Sam Bradford plays isn't based on what was given up to acquire him. So how does Bradford fit into the 2016 Vikings, and is he actually going to help them? Now, Bradford has, of course, the injury concerns, and that's been a big topic so far. Can Sam Bradford stay healthy enough to justify this trade and help the Vikings? Bradford has, of course, torn his ACL twice, and last year he missed 2 games. He suffered a concussion and had a shoulder injury, and then later returned after 2 games absence. And statistically, he posted his better games in that second half of the year, and those last 3 games to close out the season. He had over 320 yards passing in each and over 66% completion in each, although he threw 3 interceptions in that stretch to 5 touchdowns, and the Eagles went 1-2, scoring 17, 24, and 35 points in those games. So I'm not really going to be taking a whole lot from these stats, but that is the most recent production Sam Bradford has. He also had a lot of drop passes last year and didn't have a great receiver core to work with. His stats last year in Philadelphia were 65% completion on 532 attempts for 3,725 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Now in Minnesota, he's stepping into a very different situation. It was an offense that was already prepared to rely mostly on Adrian Peterson, and I think the receiving core is better, especially with Stephon Diggs as the headliner. I am very interested in how the Vikings will run their offense with Bradford, who has a strong arm, he's shown accuracy, and maybe they feel with Bradford at quarterback they can push the ball down the field and have some success. But we'll have to wait and see what they want to do and when Bradford actually begins playing, which is I think one of the biggest questions right now. But I think if Bradford plays healthy, he can play well for the Vikings this year, and they shouldn't be asking him to carry the offense very often. Now, if they fall behind, then Bradford will have a more heavy workload, and I think that he's more capable than the other options at doing that. I'm not sure how reliable he's going to be if the Vikings fall behind double digits and have to make a comeback in the second half. But the Vikings have a lot of faith in him, otherwise they wouldn't have given up the picks they did to acquire him. And obviously I'm hoping for the best this year being a Vikings fan, but I'm not really sure how optimistic to be. I don't have a strong opinion about this trade, whether it was very good or very bad, but I do think that it gives them their best chance for success this year. And we'll see down the road if the compensation was worth it. That I'm still obviously iffy on, but as far as just acquiring Sam Bradford, the player, compared to other players, I think they picked the best quarterback option. And as I always am, I'm excited to see how this works out for the Vikings. What does it take for this trade to be a success for the Vikings? Well, obviously, if either one of those escalators kick into that conditional pick, that's because Sam Bradford and this team was successful. So if that happens, that was good. But is that the benchmark for a success? I think if the Vikings take a step forward this year on offense with Sam Bradford, then it is a success. It has to be a good step that helps them remain a playoff team, and if they can do that, I will say that was probably worth it. Although, beyond this year, then things get interesting because Bradford's on a 2-year contract, and he has a roster bonus due in March, and there's still uncertainty about Teddy Bridgewater's injury and when he's actually going to be ready to play. And hopefully that is the beginning of 2017, but we'll obviously have to wait and see on a lot of different things here with the Vikings. But I'll just summarize it by saying I like the player, not the compensation so much. But obviously, if Bradford plays well, then it's all fine. It's just he has to prove a lot to show that a first and a fourth was worth it. I believe the Vikings are in a position to do very well, and that they are one of the teams that can afford this risk, especially in a year they're very confident about the current state of their team. You could argue it's equally as risky to go with Shaun Hill and see what happens. Hill has played well this preseason, and hopefully he plays well when he's asked to play. But we'll see how many games he will actually be starting and when Sam Bradford takes over as the Vikings starting quarterback. So that's basically all I had to say in today's video. One more thing, he is reunited with Pat Shurmur, who is the Vikings tight end coach and spent time with Bradford at St. Louis and Philadelphia. So connection there. That's always fun to connect the dots here before games are actually played. That's a big off-season thing. He was the offensive coordinator in St. Louis from 2009 to 2010 and the offensive coordinator and interim head coach in Philadelphia last year. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on the Vikings trading for Sam Bradford down below in the comments section. And let me know what you thought of this video overall. Have a great day, guys. I will see you later.